Good morning and welcome to Behind the Screen. I am JM, and this is a show where we hang out, we talk about games, board games, card games, role-playing games, things of beauty, things that inspire us. And I am glad to be here this morning, a little behind the eight ball. It turns out when my producer Tink goes out onto the on other trips that I am scrambling without her. Tink, thanks for everything you do for the show, and welcome and good morning to Padre. And before we get started, even though I know he's not in there, happy birthday to John Doom. His birthday was yesterday. Celebrate all of the goodness that is John Doom and the Savage Worlds community. Speaking of Savage Worlds, I will be on Savage Universe tonight to talk with Tracy and a couple of other guests about the Han cluster, which is cruising through stretch goals. Let's see here. Where's Tracy at? Cluster backer kit. Actually, I'm going to get to have Tracy on Behind the Screen next week to talk about it. Han Cluster is currently at $13,500 of a $3,000 goal, funded in 26 minutes. Well done, Tracy, and everyone who's involved with the Han Cluster at E240 Games. But today, we are going back in time. We're going to a simpler time in gaming, a time where monsters were evil, alignment was required, and adventures were wilder. The rules about what counted as an adventure or a module were not as formalized as they are today. I think in a lot of ways, 3.0 kind of made this shift where 3rd edition D&D said, hey, we're going to be self-referential. D&D is now large enough and has been around long enough that we don't have to reference outside material. It's why the rediscovery, some of us never lost it, but the rediscovery of Appendix N from the early days of Dungeons and Dragons has been so revitalizing to the hobby, because Gary and Dave and the people who were writing these adventures early on, they weren't reading fantasy as we understand it today. They were reading Elric and Fafhrd and Greymouser and Paul Anderson's Broken Sword and Three Hearts and Three Lions and Conan. The more Lord of the Rings stuff doesn't really come in until much later, and modern fantasy and D&D have this sort of incestuous back and forth relationship that it all kind of gets stirred together, and you get adventures that feel familiar and also the same, which is really strange. But back in the early days, these people were the original writers were pioneering taking things that they loved from fantasy, mashing them together, and putting them out into the wild. And one of the greatest of these module writers, it should come as no surprise, is the late, great Gary Gygax. Gary gave us a ton of great modules, gave us Greyhawk, and in his later years, he was working with Troll Lord Games, which you guys, you've been following the channel at all, should know that I'm a fan of Troll Lord Games. And so one of the things that they were going to do when they got the license back from the estate to produce things like Yigsburg and Castle Zygag, which is also crushing it. They're almost to $500,000 on backer kit. Good morning, Grom, and happy birthday again to John Doom. Met you because of this channel, John Doom, because of the Horror at Headstone Hill game, and very glad that I did that, because that led to a great friendship. So cheers to you, bud. So they brought back Castle Yigsburg, and then one of the things they were going to do is they took Gary Gygax's Hermit and updated it to Castle's Crusades and brought it out. And first of all, if you are a fan of Troll Lord Games, as I am, if I had one complaint, is the paper quality is okay. It's not great. It's very glossy. Never been my favorite book and go, oh, I love that paper quality. They definitely upgraded the paper quality. I know it's a dumb thing to say, but it brings me so much joy. It's almost parchment-like. It holds color very well. And so they updated Gary Gygax's The Hermit to Castles and Crusades, and I got it. I backed the Kickstarter. It comes with this gorgeous regional map. This side as well, and a little battle map there. And I'm going to cover it in a very high level because, I thought Steven was being coy when we were talking about it, going, oh no, I can't really reveal too much because I don't want to spoil the adventure. And it starts off with the king summoning all of his wizards for an event, and this one wizard doesn't show up. Lodash the Lonely doesn't show up. People think he's spurning the king. The king's kind of irate about this and hires the adventuring party to go out into the wilderness and bring back Lodash. And that is how it starts. Very typical D&D style adventure. Hey, the king needs you to find somebody and bring them back. And that is where the adventure goes off into... Gary could have taken the path well traveled. He's traveled down that path many a times, writing adventures like, that have stood the test of time. But instead, he finds this little forest cut and steps off the main path. And when you get to Lodash's, much hilarity, much Bay interruption doth begin. And we have references to, this is an adventure that doesn't take from your stereotypical sort of D20 melange of adventures. This is something that is far more akin to Grimm's fairy tales, to Alice in Wonderland, to the myths and stories of medieval Europe, back when the forests were dark and filled with things that were neither angel nor demon, but something in between. The fae folk, the fairies that are incredibly powerful and vindictive, yet can be friends of man. And this adventure has it all. It's got great NPC interactions, it's got betrayals, it's got mysteries, it's got several dungeon crawls, except they're not dungeon crawls in the traditional sense. You're not going through the dungeon to kill the monster, you're going through the dungeon to solve the puzzle. I'm going to be honest, it's Alice in Chains is it's a great reference there. Well done, John Doom. Benny for the next time I'm running in Savage Worlds. So, what do you get? Well, it's $40. You get a 128-page adventure. Again, it's designed for Castles and Crusades, but if I've not mentioned this before, Castles and Crusades can easily be adapted to anything that's D20 adjacent. You could also adapt this to Savage Worlds with the Fantasy Companion or Savage Pathfinder. Very easy. And in fact, this might actually work very well as an adaptation for Savage Worlds. Because one of my, John Doom and I talk about this quite a bit, one of the artifacts, if you will, of Savage Pathfinder and playing through Rise of the Runelords is the encounters are really more set up like Pathfinder encounters than they are like Savage Worlds encounters. The Hermit is not set up like a traditional D20 fantasy encounter. Now I want to approach Troll Lord Games about doing a conversion of the Hermit for Savage Worlds Fantasy Companion. But anyway, it's hard to explain. So at this point, the spoiler-free review is over. So if you don't want to know what's going on, now is the time to step away. So I'll give a quick little pause here. All right. When the players get to... Oh, hold on. Let's see here. John Doom's got a question. I should do it. Do it today. Also about Castles and Crusades. What is the stylistic type of D&D that it's closest related to? John Doom, that's a great question. So, Castles and Crusades mechanically feels like a modern D&D game, right? D20, pretty unified mechanic, ascending AC, Um, all of the things that in general people were like, hey, this was an improvement in third edition. Stylistically, though, it plays far more like a more robust old school adventure. It's not a mudcore game, if that makes sense. Um, but it is much more along the thematic lines of, hey, you are adventurers picking up the swords with with just a couple of spells to begin and going out into the world. Their settings are very Germanic, Volsung, Icelandic inspired. But again, I like that kind of it's a perfect admixture of old school aesthetic and modern game design. So that's where that fits. Okay, so you get to Lodash and you find that he's missing. But is he missing, or is he gone off on an adventure and left clues to where he's at? In order to find Lodash, you have to deal with the brownies that live near his hut. And they give you a bunch of seemingly random junk that, if you are paying attention, is the only way to successfully navigate this puzzle dungeon. There's no monsters in this first dungeon. It's can you solve the puzzles to get the artifacts that will help you get to Lodash? And then you end up in an underwater fairy kingdom dealing with changes to your perceptions, betrayals, court intrigue on in the fairy courts, as well as the fact that the group has to make a decision. Do they side with Lodash? Did Lodash make the correct decision not showing up before the king, or do they follow the king's command because he is the lawful ruler, despite stories that unfold in this? It is a very unique adventure. It's fun. It's interesting. I can't wait to run this. I would run this today. I'm very happy with both Gary's design and Castles and Crusades' presentation of this. So yeah, I think this would actually be a very easy one, John Doom, to port over into Savage Worlds. Basically as is. I would just have to redesign some of the monsters and the rest of the adventure would flow. I can't wait to run this for Tink and Happy Haley Face. By the way, they're both playing in my Singularity game. They're one half of my Singularity game, and it has been going great. I can't wait to do a end of April, early May kind of update on the Singularity game. Yeah, John Doom, it does not have a combat focus. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some new and interesting monsters in here. Giant water spiders, giant snapping turtles. Hope they're not hiding in an outhouse. A couple of new monstrous humanoids, an ogre warhound, which looks just amazing. But again, these would be, and then a ton of fey creatures. So I would like to give that a try. I may reach out to Trollord about this. But if you were looking for a fun, unique, completely unique adventure, something that harkens more to grim fairy tales, to stories of Celtic legend about interacting with the Fae, this is an amazing adventure to start with. And again, yes, it's $40. You can get the PDF cheaper. But also, even if you're not into Castles of Crusades and you're running 5th edition D&D or Pathfinder or Savage Worlds Fantasy, this is the kind of creative adventure that's going to introduce new, in quotes, old ideas into your game. One of the things I love about adventures like this is that they get us as game masters to think outside of the boxes that we may have painted ourselves into. Padre, sounds fun. We should do a day of Where Is Your Campaign At recaps. I love this idea. I'm going to post this in the Iconic Discord, And sometime in April, I will read off kind of everybody who wants to say, hey, here's where my campaign's at, here's what's going on. We'll do an iconic patron campaign update. And I'll talk about my Singularity game, I'll talk about the kids' D&D game, and then I'll read whatever information you guys want to share about your campaigns at home. So that's it. I'm out for the week. Next week on Tuesday, I'm very excited. I'm going to be looking at, again, like I said, they're not game related, but they are a company that's putting out some amazing graphic novels that align a lot with like my own aesthetics of beauty, as well as interests of mine in, say, like Bronze Age and early Iron Age mythology and early church history. So I'm going to show those off. I'm going to try and get a second camera. My extra camera did not work as well as I wanted it to, so I got to see about that. But I want to show off the 3 graphic novels that are available from Symbolic World right now. God Dog Monster, which is the God Dog Warrior, Volume 2 is coming out here shortly. Snow White and the Widow Queen, and Jack and the Fallen Giants. So that's it. That's it for today. Until next time, be safe, or stay safe, stay gaming, stay healthy, some order. I am JM, this has been Behind the Screen, and I will see you all on Tuesday for more of Behind the Screen and some look at some pretty amazing comic books. Until then, have a good one.